So to get started, I'm just going to add an icosphere into the center. So right here, give it 5 subdivisions, and I'll shade it smooth with right click and shade smooth. Then you can aim your camera at your icosphere like this, and then head over to the shading workspace. Get yourself a 3D viewport set up, and then for the lighting, I'm just using the built-in 3D lighting or Blender already has for you. Then I'll go to my camera view, and then get my new material here. I've already created a new one called bronze. It's just like this. Then we're going to press Shift-A and search up a noise texture. And then we're going to go to Edit Preferences and make sure we have the Node Wrangler add-on enabled with this checkbox right here. Then I'll select the noise texture and hit Control-T, and then move the object from the texture coordinate into the mapping. Then on this noise texture, we're going to switch the detail to a 16 and the roughness to a 0.6. And if we Control Shift and left click, we can preview the noise texture. Then I'm going to be adding in a map range node to adjust this a little bit more. So I'll hit Shift-A, search, and type in range, which will help us find our map range node right here. And then I'll take the factor and move it into the value. Then on this, we're going to be upping the contrast between the black and the white. So we're going to take this top value and move it to a 0.25. Then we'll take the from max and move it to a 0.75. This, which just ups the contrast a bit. Next, we're going to hit Shift-A and add a map node. We're going to leave this one on add, and this essentially subtracts and adds value to our original. So I'm going to leave it on a 0 for now, and I'm going to check this clamp box right here. And we're going to be using this node quite a bit, so I'm going to select it and then press Control-J just so that we have a, it's easy to refer to in the future. So then next, we're going to factor this guy into our roughness. So we'll hit Shift-A and search up a map node here. And then I'm going to take this value and move it into here. And then we're going to have this on a 0.1. Basically what this is saying is that no matter what happens in this node up here, the value is going to be at a minimum of 0.1. So yeah, I'm going to clamp this. And then as you can see, if we move this to 0, it doesn't add anything. If we move it to 0.1, it's adding. You can sort of see the visual effect there. So then next, we want to factor this into a little bit more. So we'll hit Shift-A and search up our map range node again, like this. And then we want to specify how rough the bronze should be on the metal part. So at minimum, the roughness should be a 0.1. We've established that. But at maximum, we're going to make the roughness right here a 0.65. So this is going to keep everything within that certain range, so it's not going to be too rough. So now that we have this is ready to be factored into our roughness once we get our oxidation done. But for now, I'll just go ahead and plug it into the roughness so that we know. So next, I'm going to be factoring in the colors. So we'll hit Shift-A, search for a Mix RGB node here. These are going to be our 2 different bronze colors, the newer bronze and the older bronze. And we're going to take the value from this special guy right here and move it into our Mix RGB. Control Shift and left click to preview. Then this top guy, I'll go ahead and give you the hex value. This is going to be the newer bronze color. The hex value is going to be a CD7F32. Again, that is a CD7F32. Like this. Then this bottom value is going to be the darker older bronze, and it's going to be a 4D2D00. Again, that is a 4D2D00. Like this. And now we can see we have the nice mixing going on here. So now we're going to factor in a little bit of bump. And what this is going to do is where the older bronze is coming in, it's going to get a little bit bumpier than where the previous was. And we don't want it to be too much of an effect though. I'll hit Shift-A and search for a bump node here. Grab the result of our map range into the height. And if we Control Shift left click, we can preview this. And we want to move it all the way down to a 0.05. Just so it's very subtle where the older bronze is sort of engulfing the other one because it's sort of warping a little bit, very slightly obviously as it gets older. Anyways, our next step is going to be to add in a little bit more bump where the old bronze is in comparison to the new bronze. Because if this right here is a -1, which is the newest bronze, there's no bump going on, which is what we want. But if this is the oldest bronze at a 1, then what happens is it's also perfectly smooth, but we want this to have a little bit of bump in it. So we're going to hit Shift-A, and we'll search for another noise texture here. We're going to take the vector from this and move it into our new vector. Then we're going to Control Shift and left click this guy, change the scale to a 100 and the detail to a 16. And I'll change the distortion to a 1 because why not? Then I'm going to add in a map range node here. So I'll just take this guy and hit Shift D and, oops, not the noise texture. The map range node, hit Shift D and move him in right here. Then the values on this, the minimum I'm going to move to a 0, and the max will be a 0.25. And this is just going to lower the contrast between these quite significantly. Then we need to factor this in to only happen where there is the dark brown. So we move this to a 0 again and preview it. We can see what's going on here. The white is where the dark brown is, and the black is where the light brown is. So if we hit Shift A, I'm going to search for a math node here, and I'm going to search for the function right here to a greater than, and I'm going to take the value from our special guy up here and move him into this value. I'll check clamp, and if we Control Shift and left click to preview, what this does is it gives us a returns a black or white value based on what's happening in here. And then on this guy, we're going to switch the threshold to a 0.1 like this. So as you can see here, everywhere that it's not perfectly the original color, it's going to be a little bit bumpy is what this mask is saying. So let's Shift A, search for a mix RGB. We're going to take this result here and put it into color 2. Then we're going to take color 1 and move it to a black. Then we'll take this value here and then put it into our factor. And we'll check clamp on this as well. So if we Control Shift and left click to preview, this is what it looks like when it's in between the old and the new. And if we put it to -1, this is what it looks like perfectly new, no bump. And if we put it to older, it looks completely bumpy, which is what we want. So I'll go ahead and put it back to a 0. Obviously, you can change this threshold how you want. If you don't want it to be affecting it very much, you can move it to like something like a 0.5. But I like a little bit of bump. Plus, it's going to be very subtle anyways, so I'm going to leave it at 0.1. So then I'll hit Shift A, search for a bump node here. I'm going to take the color from our mix RGB into the height, and then for the strength, I'm going to move it all the way down to a 0.075. So if we preview this with Control Shift and left click, we can see that it's very subtle and not much is happening. Same as this one, which is very subtle bumps that are adding a little bit of detail to the bronze. So I'm going to take this normal from this bump and move it into this one. And now we're ready to start working on our oxidation mask. So I'm going to scroll up here a little bit. I'll press Shift A and search for a noise texture like this. Take this vector into this and I'll preview it. And then we're going to switch the detail to a 16 and then we'll leave everything else where it is. Then I'm going to press Shift A and add a math node here like so. And then I'll put the value to a 0 real quick so we can see what's going on, and I'll check clamp. So currently this is the exact same thing as the noise texture, and what this is going to be affecting is where it is oxidized. So if we lower this value, just like on the previous bronze, it gets less oxidized, and if we up it, it gets more oxidized, like so. So currently it's in between, and I'll leave it there for the moment. But as this is our mask, we can factor it into our roughness now, and then into our bump as well. And then also our color, which will happen thirdly. So hit Shift A and search for a mix RGB node here. And I'm going to move that down here for our roughness. I'm going to take this value, and I'm going to move it into our factor. I'll Control Shift left click to preview this. I'm going to take this color from our map range that's already plugged into the roughness, and plug it into color 2 here. Then if we're already previewing it, and then I'm going to take this color 1, and on the HSV, I'm going to change the value to a 0.85, like this. As you can see now, as there is less oxidation, we move it to a -1. Oh, and we plugged this color into the wrong one. So just move this color into color 1, and then change this one to the 0.85. There we go. So as you can see, if there's no oxidation, if we preview this, there's nothing happening here. And we have our normal roughness. But the more oxidation we have here, the more it starts to take account into the overall roughness. And obviously this is going to scale with the other textures as well at the very end. Anyways, now that we've done that, we can take this color now and move it into the roughness instead of the other one. And check clamp on this for good measure. Then we're going to factor this into the bump. So I'll just press Shift A, search for a bump node again, like this. take this value, move it into our height, and switch the strength to a 0.1. If we preview this real quick, we can see that it's perfectly smooth, and that's because we are on no oxidation. And then if we scroll this up right here while holding shift, we can see the more bump occurring as it gets more oxidized, which is exactly what we want to be happening. That's awesome. So now we can just take this normal right here and move it into this bump normal, and then take this normal and move it into the shader normal. Now we have all of our bumps accounted for. And now to factor in our colors for the oxidation, we'll hit Shift A, search for a mix RGB here. Then we're going to take our map range from this guy actually and move it into our factor, just so that we get the same sort of effect going on here with the noise. And then we're going to take this first value, and I'll go ahead and give you the hex, and that is going to be a A9C or a B6. Again, that is an A9C or B6. Like so. Then the second value is going to be a 72A AA2. Again, that is a 72A AA2. Like so. And we can sort of see we have the mixed effect of the oxidation colors going on there. So we just have to mix the colors with the bronze colors. So we'll hit Shift A, search for another mix RGB here. And then for the factor on this guy, it is very simple. We are taking that from this math node into the factor. Then we're taking this color here into color 2, and then this color here into color 1. And if we preview this guy, we can see that we have this right now. That is because we currently have no oxidation happening here. Obviously, if we increase this, we get more oxidation, etc., etc. Then we can take this color here and move it into the base color. And now that we've done that, all we have to do is factor into our animation. Currently, we have the finished material that you can play with however you like. But if you wanted to automate the age, stick around for just a little bit longer. So to start that off, we're going to hit Shift A and search for a value node. And then all we have to do with this guy is have him factoring into our age in the bronze at the same rate as it factors into the oxidation. So let's go ahead and put the bronze at age 0, so -1. And the oxidation is already at age 0. So then going into the oxidation, we'll do that first. We're going to hit Shift A, search for a math node. I'm going to search for 2 math nodes actually. I'm going to duplicate this guy. And this first one, we're going to put all the values on 0 right now on this add. On the second one, we're going to make this bottom one a -1. And then we'll take, for the top one, we'll take the value of the previous one. And then we'll plug this into here. As you can see, that doesn't make a difference. So currently, we have a brand new no oxidation. And so the reason for that is if we take this value into our scale here, it's going to do nothing again. But if we switch this to a 1, then currently we have 1, and eventually it says -1, and then equals 0, which is its half-life, so it's halfway covered, it's halfway oxidized. But we don't want that to be happening instantly, and so we need to change this value here to a -1.3, because we want that to be happening at half of the rate. We don't want it to start getting oxidized until it's already turned brown. And so to get it to turn brown at the right point, we're going to hit Shift A. We will search for another math node here. And it's add as well. We'll put this at a 0. And then what was the bottom value, we'll switch to a -1. So then when we put this value in here, 1 minus 1 equals 0, which means the bronze is at a half-life. And so if we move this original value node to a 0 here, we can see that we have brand new bronze. It's not metal though, so we need to go here and make it metallic. There we go, now it's metallic, as it should be. Then if we move it to its half-life, which is a 1, we can see that we have half bronze, like the bronze and the new bronze and the old bronze are mixing. If we move it to a 2, we can see that it is now all dark brown and oxidized. And if we move it to a 3, it becomes fully oxidized. So those are the stages. Obviously, there are in-betweens and everything. If we go 1.1 by 0.1 here, all the way back to the beginning, we can see the whole process like that. Anyways, I'll move this back to a 0. Now that we have that, we have this guy, which can drive the forces of all our other nodes. And so something cool we can do is I'm going to head back to layout real quick. I'm going to give myself the timeline. So I'll go into the corner here and pull up. change this to our timeline here. And so to drive it, all we have to do is decide how long we want our animation to be. So there's the output, and we can locate the file where we want to put it, and then set up all our frame rate. We're going to do 24 FPS. Then head over to your render settings right here. And then I'm going to use filmic and medium high contrast, just like that. And then you can use however many samples you want. I'll use something like 1,000. And then right here on frame start and frame end, we'll go ahead and start on frame 0 and then end on frame 240. We'll head back over the shading here. So then we can add a driver into this. So we can say that because we need to get to the value, the life starts at 0 and the life ends at 3. And so we need to get to a value of 3 in 240 frames. So we'll type this number sign right here, and we'll do frame divided by, and then parentheses, we can have however many frames you chose to make your animation, divided by 3, just like that. And then currently we are on frame 1, so it starts at a value, but if we go back a frame to frame 0, we have frame 0. And then if you hit play on your animation, you can see that it plays through the process. It's a little bit laggy in the viewport, obviously, because it's not taking all the samples, but you can see it working through everything, and it starts to look really cool. And then that's just a super easy way that you can animate your lifetime. And you can also control it manually, obviously. You can take the driver away by right-clicking and hit delete driver, and then you can play with everything manually and decide how old you want your bronze to be. But with that said, the tutorial is now over. I'm going to go ahead and, you already saw the animation earlier, so you can go ahead and render out your animation, and then you can do it in reverse as well, and then you can loop it like that, and it's super cool. Anyways, hopefully you enjoyed this, and come back for more procedural material tutorials in the future. I'll see you in the next one.